Hey guys, Luke 22, verse 39. And he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. And when he came to the place, he said to them, Pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose from the prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The Trinitarian, at this particular verse, the position forces you to rob Jesus of everything he's ever done. You're forced into a position where you have to say, Jesus was not afraid, truly. God the Son was not afraid. But it was the flesh of Jesus, or Jesus in the flesh. I think this has to be the most disrespectful thing. Everything he ever struggled with was in the flesh. And the biggest problem you have when it comes to verses like this, and you want to claim that it was in the flesh, you have the problem of consciousness. What defines a person? It's clearly, it's what he knows. It's his memories and his individual personality. And if you're going to say that there was a part of Jesus that didn't know what the other part of Jesus knew, congratulations, you have two persons on your hands. And when you get to the cross, the same problem bears itself out. Which one died? And if you notice, you get a hint in the book of Revelations. He says, Behold, I was once dead, but now I am alive forevermore. Now would imply that there was a change of state. And being God really doesn't explain this. Being a human does. Jesus was at that very hour when he knew he was facing death. He was facing oblivion. He was quite possibly facing the end of his only unique existence that would ever be on this earth. And to say that it was his flesh, or he was saying this in the flesh from a limited perspective, you say it in an insulting way. You say it was in the weakness of the flesh. It was his weakness that he took on for us. But in reality, this very passage was his strength. Knowing that the end was upon him, knowing that he had to take that final step of faith, this moment may be the single most defining moment for Jesus. This was his last chance to turn and run. And notice when he says that, when he prays, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. He didn't want to die. He was scared, as any of us would be. But he says, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Father, this is where I'm at. This is how I feel. But nevertheless, I will carry on. And in this moment of his personal inner triumph, this is the very moment the Trinitarian has to spit in his face. He has to say, this was the imperfect or the weak part of Jesus. This was the part that wasn't God. This was the part that was a flawed man. And when in reality, he doesn't even get that credit, does he? The flesh just becomes a thing, a putty to be molded by the Trinitarian. How can you disrespect Jesus in such a way? At his greatest moments of strength, here on the cross, when he was facing the end, you just dismiss it, you shrug your shoulders and you say, It was for our benefit. It was the flesh. But yet we know from the scriptures that God cannot die. God is not afraid of his creation. Who can thwart God's plans? Jesus being God and being afraid of dying is like me being afraid of my 2-year-old child. It's just funny. But yet you have to find a way to insult Jesus. There's nothing else you can do. You have to say this was a flaw. This was something less than God the Son. Well, did God the Son say it or not? And if you think he didn't, once again, congratulations. You have 2 people on your hands. But I don't believe that. I believe at this very moment, as the walls were coming down around him, his friends abandoned him. He walked alone. Yet he was not alone. He had faith in his Father, and he stayed the course, and he reached down deep, and he laid his soul bare, and he walked that mile because he loved God so much. I don't understand how the enemy has been so successful that the greatest triumph of our Messiah has been perverted and twisted and taken from him. A Trinitarian basically has to deny Jesus. He has to say that this wasn't the real Jesus. The real Jesus died and went to heaven. No, the real Jesus was scared and laid silent in a tomb for 3 days. And he asked the Father to glorify him, and he did. He said, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? He got his answer 3 days later. I have not forsaken you. I have raised you up to my right hand. I have made you the Lord over all creation. Jesus faced his doubts and his fears because he was truly human. It wasn't some fancy act. It wasn't some sleight of hand that God pulled on us so we would be confused, and some parlor trick that even the devil himself didn't understand what was going on. What we had was a man who was so committed to God that he overcame his fears. Nothing else was more important to him than fulfilling the mission he was sent to do. And I find it an atrocity and a despicable act for people to sit there and look at that man upon the cross and turn him into a thing. When his spirit went up from him, then his flesh cries out, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? Do its cry out? Do its have fathers? No. People have fathers. We live in a world today where we will save the trees and the whales, but we'll kill our own babies. We live in a world where a beautiful message was handed down to us, and we've perverted it. We've twisted it beyond recognition, where we have people who are supposed to be the fathers of the church teaching things that they can't even comprehend. And what is that? What is it to teach something that you can't comprehend? Does that even make any sense to you? If I knew nothing of algebra and could not explain how it works, would I be teaching that? I think colleges would be a very different place if we taught things we didn't understand, but only in church. Only in church where anyone can come up off the street and claim the anointing of God and start running their mouth, teaching all kinds of blasphemy, stripping Jesus of his most beautiful acts. These are the moments I cherish the most from Jesus, because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where Jesus put all doubters to the side. This is where he depended on his Father. He walked completely into faith. Imagine walking off a cliff. and all you had was faith that your Father would keep his promise. Jesus never doubted his Father. His faith was much stronger than ours, I'm sure. But at this moment, he sweated tears that were like drops of blood. Do its do that? Do glasses of water sweat like drops of blood? No. I don't think of any more words that could be more moving than to show the pure agony he was facing. And this was not a man of violence. Yes, he flipped the tables, but that was not out of violence. That was out of love for his Father and the anger for those who had perverted his word before him. And before you think that it's not possible for the doctrines of the church to be twisted up this way, refer back to Jesus. A tradition of Judaism that's came forth from Abraham thousands of years before Jesus. He came because, and like I said, I'm not so sure in all cases it's the devil, but because men had so twisted up the truth of God, he was forced to confront him. And I noticed the people that I consider to be the most Christian people always run into problems like this. They run into people who just hate them. Why? Because they don't believe a doctrine. They believe a God. They believe that they should follow the path that was laid before them. And if you follow Jesus' words as literally as possible, he never said to worship me, for I am God. He said, I have a God, and he's your God, my Father and your Father, my God and your God. Those statements ring true, and no matter how much you twist them, anyone who's willing to just listen to the words of Jesus will not believe you. You continue to insult him. You continue to strip him of everything he ever did and attribute it to someone else, this God the Son. Yet we find that he's missing from the book of Genesis. We find he's missing from the book of Isaiah. We find he's missing from the book of Psalms as a physical person. He is spoken of. He's foretold. And in the glorious day, his birth finally comes. And no matter what you believe about that birth, that day changed history. A man entered into the world that was unlike any other man that would come again. The second Adam. God's promise to mankind. God's love letter to mankind. He endured every indignity. He suffered at the hands of peoples that were not worthy to insult him. He was beaten, and finally they took his life from him. And I look back on that moment, and it's hard, because I think I can see it. I can see him there looking down, and the only thought that was on his mind was, how could he help them? And here we are today, and we strip him of all of those things, and we attribute it to someone else. I'm not going to put up with it. I am going to confront you people. I am going to continue to speak the truth, because it's not right. Jesus gave everything so we could inherit everything. And we turn around and we slap him in the face and we say he's not really Jesus. That flesh really wasn't Jesus. Jesus was a spirit named Yahovah that existed at creation. He wasn't really elevated to the right hand of God. He wasn't really made Lord. What he was someone just returning to his original position. You people need to stop and think about these things. It's impossible. It's impossible to see what Jesus was trying to do for us and think that he is God. He never claimed such a thing. What kind of person takes the words of his teacher and reaches a conclusion of something he never said? I believe Jesus told the truth plainly to the disciples. Moreover, he lived it. Yet we don't find this teaching anywhere. We find a son who is perfectly obedient and put up with people, quite frankly, that didn't deserve to even see his face. They saw the right hand of God. They saw the promise, just like the man said in Matthew. He tells him, your servant can rest, depart now in peace, for I have seen your salvation. He was such a precious gift to those who understood. We live in a world that is hurting, and God sent us a very, very special man. A big brother, a king, a priest, a father, a son. He's everything to us. And the world has twisted this man's great deeds to such a point that they're unrecognizable. You will literally sit here and tell me that this was the flesh. Doesn't sound like that to me. It sounds like a man named Jesus bore his soul for mankind. So think about it. How can this make any sense to you? How long will you play the game? How long will you have the human Jesus and the God Jesus and just jump arbitrarily anytime you need to? Anytime you want to glorify him, you make him God. Anytime you want to kind of play down something he did, you make him a man. Glorify him as he presented himself, as the Son of God, spiritually adopted to inherit the Holy Spirit and show us the way. Quit playing the games. Quit thinking that the modern church can't come from a history that has holes the size of Mack trucks in them. Theology came on the scene and it destroyed everything good about Christianity. They wiped out anyone who disagreed with them. These are your church fathers, people that prayed for violence and death on other men just for not agreeing with them. These are the same people that would kill you for having a Bible, and you entrust them with your very soul, and you deny the words of Jesus to his face. There's a line that seems very appropriate, and when he tells them that you have made void the power of God because of the vain traditions of men. Did you think the modern church would be any different? Did you think it wouldn't come under attack? Judaism had been around, yet it had the truth, yet it was completely twisted. And they added things to Judaism, didn't they? And they added things to Christianity. And then the Christians will claim things like progressive revelation. Well, congratulations, here comes Islam. All this stuff is not necessary. The records have been preserved. The truth is in them. All you have to do is accept what he said about himself. Quit telling me what he meant and just do what he said. God bless you.